Drill R&D podcast episode 94. This is Alex Caravan, VP of Business Ops, drinking a freshly opened grapefruit Sculpin from Ballast Point. And
open the box.
Okay.
And then I am Jason Lieb, head of MMAI. I have a Cruz Blanca, unsponsored. There's a little shine on it. Mexico Calling from Chicago Breweries. And I've got a mug that says my name on it that my girlfriend got me.
Let's go. Cheers, dog.
Yep. Cheers.
Dude, are you repping a Mexican lager for Alexa?
I wish I'd thought of that. Let's retake this. Let me go get another one.
That's my girl, dude.
Oh, Alexa's great. I'm so excited for this fight. I don't know if you want to get into that right away, but I'm a huge fan of Alexa Grasso's boxing and her scramble ability on the ground. I worked with a fighter, Viviane Araujo, who was fighting her, and watching that fight, I was like, man, it's hard because I want to root against her. I mean, I don't want to root against her, but I prepared so much against her. She's great. I can't wait for this Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down to get into it, but
no, I'm just kidding. I was
gonna say, first intro yourself a little bit, and I think it'd be funny to talk about how we kind of linked up too, and start talking. But give people a little bit of background.
Sure. So I am the founder of MMAI. We do analytics work in the MMA space. My entire inspiration for starting MMAI was Driveline. I read the book that I'm now forgetting. That was
MVP Machine.
Guys. Which one?
MVP Machine.
Yeah, I read MVP Machine, and I was with my girlfriend, and I told her I want to be that for MMA. So that was the entire inception of MMAI. So you and I met because I don't remember which fight it actually was, but one of the strategies I had for building up my audience was just to reply guy. So all these major MMA people saying like, check out my video. And I don't know which it was that you saw, because I was tweeting like 50 times an hour, but eventually I got a follow from Alex Caravan, and I was just, I wasn't getting followed by many people. So I look at your bio and I saw director of data science at Driveline. And I can't describe to you the excitement. My girlfriend's name is Vanya, for those that don't know. And I told Vanya, the director of data science at Driveline followed me. So then I calmed down and I sent Alex a DM like, hey, big fan of your work, try to keep it cool. But I told anybody, I still tell anyone that Driveline is, I follow you guys on every social media. You guys are the model of what I'd like to do for MMA. So I make YouTube videos on using data to describe fighters, to try and explain to more casual fans to understand the wide breadth of talent levels in the sport. But also for hardcore fans, I offer a different version of an understanding of the sport. I've started doing more business videos to kind of explain the ecosystem of MMA as a whole. More famously, I guess, is my gambling video that some of the major outlets picked up, and I've done a couple of talks on that. But mostly my passion is for the actual developmental side of MMA. So, so I've created a couple software products, fun stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I forget what fight it was, too. I just remember it was a Jack Slack tweet or something. Also, I think you're still reply guying quite a bit, bro.
I still do it. That's how I get my following.
It's definitely effective. What's the most popular one was the James Krause video, right?
Yeah, the gambling video is by far my most famous video.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's really interesting, especially from a very casual sports fan point of view. Because I think just to bury the lead, I don't think most people realize, unless you actually follow MMA, like how scumbaggy the UFC and Dana White is, and just the overall fight business, like how many. Just how much a Wild West situation it is, and how blatant the gap is in both professionalism, amount of revenue going to the fighters, health benefits, like the list goes on and on. Yeah. So I think maybe touching on that a little bit, and then talking about the betting scandal.
Sure.
It's pretty interesting right off the bat, and then we can kind of get more into fights.
So at a high level, if you're a baseball fan, the understanding of the way that the UFC structures itself monetarily is not really going to make sense. It doesn't follow a traditional model like the MLB, NFL, NBA. where there are revenue splits because of a labor union, where whenever they have a collective bargaining agreement, they're deciding what percentage of revenue goes to players and what goes to ownership, right? So the UFC follows a structure that is, it's kind of like boxing, but in some ways simpler and some ways more complicated. They have a show win model. So if you are a fighter and you're fighting, you get paid half of your check for stepping into the octagon and the door closing, and then the other half if you win. So there's certainly a possibility that you are not making enough to actually cover your training costs, which is different than baseball or something like that. And based on most math,
for Major League Baseball, for minor league baseball, you're still skiing.
Minor league is much more comparable. But yeah. I've been talking about minor league with some coaches as a kind of a stand-in, because I think minor league baseball is a good way of describing a lot of the problems with MMA. But the thing that I wanted to research more was if you look at the splits between athlete pay and the amount that the UFC is taking home, it's 80-20 split. 80% of revenue is kept by the UFC, 20% to players. In most leagues, it's closer to 52-48, 50-40, and 60-40 in some instances, right? So it's one of the largest disparities. And I knew all of these things as just a sort of a general watcher of the sport from a more like hardcore perspective. I listen to all the podcasts, those kind of things. You get sort of osmosis. You learn these basic facts. And one of the things that caught my eye was I was listening to a interview with a coach. His name is James Krause. And he was advertising his gambling business on the largest interview show of MMA, Ariel Helwani's show. And he was describing how he bet on his own fighters. And in my head, I'm like, you can't do that legally. Like that's highly unethical. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I kind of just threw it away. Like, okay, this is MMA. There are so many things like that happen where you go like, that shouldn't happen, but this is MMA. That's what happens. And then someone wrote me an Instagram DM because I was tweeting, and they DM'd me on Instagram and basically said, what do you think will be his punishment if he were to get in trouble? And that's when it all kicked off in my head of like, oh no. So about a week prior to that DM, there was a fight between one of James Krause's fighters and a Killcliff FC fighter who, the James Krause fighter, he pulled up with a torn knee. It was sort of like in football where you see him cut wrong and then, the knee's gone. Same kind of thing. Then he proceeded to use the knee on a kick twice, pull up again, and it was obvious he was too injured to continue. And then some information comes out immediately after the fight that the betting lines went from him being a moderate underdog to a heavy underdog, with a lot of people or a lot of money going towards him losing by first round knockout. So when you're injured and you lose, it's considered a technical knockout or a knockout by injury. And it set off alarm bells in basically every major gambler on Twitter. I was following that. And that's sort of what motivated the person to write me the question of, if he did this, what would be his punishment? The concept of this being, did Krause fix a fight, tell people that his fighter's knee was destroyed? They placed a bunch of bets on him to lose by knockout, and sort of like a 50%, 60% fixed fight, in the sense that he was so injured.
With a predetermined injury that the general public doesn't know. It's just asymmetrical information. And
exactly.
Very
asymmetrical information. And so then the person asked me that question. I just started asking myself questions like, well, why did he fight? And then if you do research, you find out that the UFC does not offer healthcare. They only offer healthcare if you injure yourself in the cage. So I started doing more research, and you find out that it's actually a regular thing for fighters. If they are too hurt to compete, but they need money, they will go in, they'll do their best, and generally they're getting knocked out, submitted, they're losing because they're just not physically capable of competing. But the only way they can get the surgery to repair their injury is to fight. And the UFC is okay with that. They understood. The issue is that when gambling started to grow in the sport, fans, more casual fans, didn't recognize that this was happening. And so then you have occurrences like that. And I want to say it was 2 or 3 weeks later, in very close proximity, the co-main event of the biggest pay-per-view of the end of last year, TJ Dillashaw had a destroyed shoulder. Like,
And I lost money on that, by the way. I lost money on that. So, I think I told you that.
That's right. We had talked about it. Yeah.
I've had a weird betting record of Aljo. I won money in the rematch with Jan. Remember? I think I told you. And I thought he was going to lose. I just thought the odds were too good. He was like a 3.5 or a 3.5 to 1 dog, and it's like Aljo's too good to be a dog like that to anybody. And then I thought TJ had his number. I just thought he matched up really well. And then go ahead. He was just surviving for a round. Got submitted or TKO'd late in the second round. I think impressive. He lasted long, but it was not a match.
No, and so because I've studied so many of these interviews, I have like this mental timeline of I'll explain in sort of like high level detail of what happened with TJ. So it turns out, based on interviews after the fact, that TJ had this is a consistent injury he's had. He tore his shoulder years ago and didn't get surgery on it because as he told it, if he gets the surgery, he's out for 9 months and he can't compete, he can't make money. And that's just not acceptable, especially he was the champion at the time. And so he's like, well, I have to defend. If I get hurt and I have to take the surgery, I lose the belt. I may never get the belt back. Another key thing to understand about the financials of the UFC is that when you're champion, that is when you make money. This is the money that the UFC can give you. You get pay-per-view points. You get a percentage of pay-per-view buys. You get a much higher show win splits. And so it made sense financially to me why he made the decision. It just didn't click for me why he was training consistently with a torn labrum in his left shoulder, if I'm remembering correctly. So TJ got popped. He did EPO, the cycling drug that allows you to better cardio, essentially. I don't know if you want me to go into detail of how EPO works. But,
allows you to win the Tour de France 7 years in a row.
Exactly.
What are drugs Lance Armstrong's famous for?
Yes. And so then he gets popped. He's out for 2 years. He gets the shoulder surgery. He comes back. He had one fight, tore his ACL in that fight, and he got surgery on it. In training for this fight, he tore his other shoulder, the labrum. And the way that he described it is that he tore the shoulder and it was coming out the front. And in the Aljamain Sterling fight, Aljamain shoots for a takedown. TJ posts on that bad shoulder, but it dislocates out the back instead of out the front. So he had, this sounds horrible, he had practiced relocating his shoulder in the middle of a fight if it went out the front. It went out the back, and it was apparently stuck in between the fascia and the muscle. So what they said to him is like, you would never be able to physically relocate your shoulder, because it was surgically, it needed to be fixed. So then he's, hobbled with a terrible shoulder trying to fight with one hand, like Warrior, the movie with Tom Hardy. And he just got destroyed. And when I watched that fight, it really became clear to me that the UFC was kind of in this pickle. To explain just a little bit more context, the UFC doesn't make money purely on pay-per-views. They have a broadcast deal with ESPN. And the way that the ESPN deal works is that they have to have a certain number of shows per year, and that's how they make their money. They get paid flat payouts for those shows. So pay-per-views are included. They get a flat payout of either $550,000 or $500,000 buys. A buy is just an individual person buying the pay-per-view. And so one of the things I realized was that the ESPN deal incentivizes them that they can't have big stars fall off their cards. But the incorporation of gambling made it so that the UFC has to sort of say, like, hey, TJ Dillashaw's shoulder is destroyed. Do not bet on him. But you can't do that, right? You can't, because then who's going to watch the fight? Who's going to allow that fight to happen? So what happens is basically on TJ to lie to the commission when his shoulder is torn and say, yeah, I'm fine. And they don't do x-rays unless you tell them to. So he went in with a torn labrum, fought, lost, unsurprisingly. And that's what kicked off this thing. So then I started doing research on the ESPN deal, the gambling deals, and I sort of come to realize.
One more quick thing to say for people that aren't as in know about UFC and just MMA, the Athletic Commission that technically like approves these fights and everything, like it depends on the state. A lot of UFC events happen in Vegas, so the Nevada State Commission. Those commissions are just like they're just honestly they're just rollovers. The UFC brings them so much business, and occasionally, like when they do say something, which we'll get to later in the episode, but like Jon Jones famously, has done a lot of things out of the cage. popped for picogram levels, or more, yeah.
Picograms, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm blanking on a drug he popped for. Do you remember?
No.
But either way, before his rematch with Gustafsson, some UFC card like mid 200s, the week of or the week before, they moved the whole event to California. The Nevada State Commission banged it. They're like, no, he tested positive for a drug, like a amount of drug that's illegal. And they're like, oh, okay, word. We'll assume in California then.
Yeah.
And then Dana probably put pressure behind the scenes on the state commission, or maybe he didn't have to. Maybe it was just like, well, whatever. We'll take the revenue, we'll take the gate, and then they just had the whole event happen. Obviously, they don't give a fuck about the smaller fighters who might be screwed, who might have like paid half their show purse to, okay, we're having this camp in Nevada, can't really afford anything else besides like show up, hopefully win, hopefully move up the ranks. Oh, wait, it's in California with a week's notice, like. Now you're like losing money just to make it to the fight. There's plenty of international fighters, like more complications there. But anyways, sorry.
The UFC would actually pay for that travel. Yeah, the UFC pays for that travel. So that part isn't as tough. It's more about the families. So all those families that have to pay, now they have to fly. Because that was a lot of what I heard. Because I was asking, I actually watched that fight this morning. UFC 232 or 235. Can't remember which one. But yeah,
Jones has been inactive for so long. Jones has been it's like Jones is like third last fight or something. Maybe fourth.
It might be fourth. It might be
Smith after. Yeah,
I think Smith was after.
Santos,
I've been watching them out of order, so my mind doesn't do a good job. Like I watched Gustafsson 1, Gustafsson 2. Gustafsson 1 was 197, I think. But actually, my first fight that I ever watched was Thiago Santos versus Jon Jones at UFC 239, I believe. It was July 7th, 2018 or 2019. But yeah, he's been very inactive. But that's I hope that the people that are listening understand just how crazy that is. It's the equivalent of I don't know, a pitcher says that they do anabolic steroids and the Phillies are like, we're just not going to let you play here. And so they're like, okay, we'll just move it to, Yankee Stadium. And everyone just has to go to Yankee Stadium now because the Phillies won't play that pitcher. I mean, it doesn't really work because these athletic commissions function differently than a team, but it is a truly insane decision that they made. Worked out, but it shows you the way that MMA is Wild West, right?
Yeah.
They just moved it. Oh, we're not going to allow him to fight. Okay, well, we're just going to go somewhere else. We're just going to shop commissions until one commission says to let us fight there. It's just a crazy situation.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, I started doing research on the gambling aspect. I started talking to coaches, fighters, managers, and what really started to become obvious to me was that this wasn't really a way that people were approaching the problem. A lot of some of the journalists that do a lot of the investigative work, they were approaching it from a mindset of an older fan. I'm a more recent fan of the sport. So I was approaching it more from an NBA, NFL mindset, MLB, where how could you allow these things to happen? How do you make these decisions? So I just started asking questions more and more. And then it just becomes this massive thing that I was texting Alex, I'm either an insane person or I've really stumbled on something bad here. And based on results, it's more the second one. But I do think there's a little bit of
still might be insane though.
There's a little bit of insanity that goes into the 3 weeks of 60-hour weeks that I put in to make that video. But it worked out in the end. Now I have a business because of that video. Dude,
yeah, that video took off. How many views does it have now on YouTube?
It is 350,000.
350,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, man.
And it's pretty cool. I still get calls from people watching it for the first time, like managers and stuff. That are interested in talking to me. I have a bunch of videos coming out soon just from talking to managers, them bringing up hey, if you want to talk about things that people aren't considering, healthcare is a big one. I'm talking to a lot of people about healthcare and the way that the UFC does a good job, does a bad job, how other MMA organizations do. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things happening on that front. And in my opinion, there's this sort of drip down effect where imagine Driveline's business if baseball players were being paid 10% the amount that they currently are. It would be very hard to sustain a business that way, right? And so what you have is a lot of these gyms where it's incredibly difficult for them to sustain a business of training fighters. And so the only ones that are as successful as to make it like a full-time thing, or these large gyms, and how does that change the landscape of MMA, right? So there's a lot of questions that all of these things spiral out from these economics that affect strategy. They affect development of fighters, the development of the product of MMA, because it is a very new sport. It's turning 30 years old this November. And so, the UFC is turning 30 years old this November. So if you consider how old the MLB is, how old baseball is a sport, basketball, this is a very new sport. And so there's a lot of effects that way.
Not only the age of the sport, also like for how long it's been approved in certain like states, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It hadn't been allowed in New York until UFC 205, I think, which is probably 2015, 2016, maybe 2017.
It's closer to 2015, 2016. Yeah.
Either way, I mean that is very recent. One of the largest states in the country.
And I was going to say the largest venue for combat sports in Madison Square Garden.
Just to kind of tie up the gambling storyline, did you want to just talk about also mentioning DraftKings? I think is kind of key as like a third party interest, because ESPN has that $500-600 million deal with DraftKings, and then DraftKings, like you can correct me, but like I think the Ontario Commission in Canada banned gambling on UFC at all for a couple of weeks. Right? Was that what it was?
Yeah, it was Ontario, then it was Alberta, if I'm remembering the timeline correct. So basically what happened was when Krause did what he did, and what essentially happened is when that the fighter's name, Shaylon Nurdenbecky versus, can't remember the other guy's name, but the other guy was Krause's fighter. Yeah. And immediately following that, the sort of gambling space on Twitter, everyone knew that something was wrong. Yeah. And the UFC did nothing. They just kind of swept it under the rug, kept going. But it didn't go away. A lot of people were asking questions, and then at one point it became very serious when there was sort of like rumblings happening that certain markets for gambling were just going to ban the UFC until they figured out what they were doing. And I think that was when DraftKings probably stepped in, called up whoever runs their partnership and said, you need to fix this. So what the UFC does is they put out a memo basically saying that fighters, coaches, family members, none of them can gamble. They didn't put anything out there of punishments. They didn't put anything out there of how we're going to check any of these things. Largely what they were saying was just that they had a gambling integrity partner that discovered this happening. And they were like, look, we found it immediately. No one won any money, the end. And all reporting after the fact does not back up that. It does seem like those people did make money. Did DraftKings freeze their accounts? There's a lot of questions there. But and this has just continued to spiral for Krause. I won't get into too deep of what's happening with him. But yeah, Ontario.
You won't tell me the behind the scenes deets you told me in Chicago?
No, I cannot tell you those on live. But there are a lot of things happening right now. He is under FBI investigation because there are further questions about not just gambling, but some other things that he was doing with regard to financial things that has been publicly reported on. He had to sell his gym. I talked about in another video. He sold his gym to his manager, and I question whether he actually is. So like he was banned in the sense that anyone that was trained by him had to move gyms, or the UFC would not book them for fights. So they did. But they also said that if you are found to be involved with Krause later, you're in trouble. And so I don't know anything, but there are questions of is how much has Krause divested from the gym that he sold to his. I mean, he did sell. There are questions of around what the thing about MMA is there are not a lot of day-to-day journalism in the sense of like people checking every single day the ownership deed of Glory MMA, the gym he owns. So without getting into too much weeds, one of his fighters, Jeff Molina, was cut from the UFC and is under investigation as well because of involvement in some aspect of these gambling things. And I believe most of his gym, they're checking on them. Not that there's anything that they've done, but more so just confirming that there's no one else involved. And so it's just become this spider web of gambling issues that all comes from him. And also he had a show on the UFC Fight Pass, which is their version of like Netflix, where he was giving gambling picks. So they knew he was doing this, the UFC, and they're acting like it's some crazy thing. It's like when you were paying him to do a gambling show on your network. I could go on forever. But
I know. Now that we're talking, it's just like, Dude, there are so many things to talk about from just the UFC being scummy point of view. I mean, we could spend hours talking about it. I mean, we did in Chicago at the Irish pub.
Yeah.
I just want to say two things for people that like don't, people that might not be as into weeds as we are. Dana White holds an incredible amount of power in this space to the point where he's boycotted the most respected MMA journalist. I mean, technically subjectively, but like he boycotted Ariel Helwani, who's won the MMA Journalist of the Year, like, I don't know, 10 or 12 times.
Yeah.
Just because he leaked Brock Lesnar's return for UFC 200. He threw him out of the arena, banned him from media post conferences. Literally, people that ask questions in the post conference are like Dana will just call on someone, and the understanding is there. Like, you know, you want to ask the questions that Dana wants you to ask, or you're just not gonna be allowed in the post conference. Dana all the time just plays dumb. Just pretend like you can watch this on YouTube. He'll literally pretend like he doesn't hear a question whenever anything like hard comes in. And the USADA, U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, which has been like the steroid check for the UFC the last couple of years. UFC hires them. They make exceptions all the time. Like, again, without getting too into the weeds, you're supposed to be in a testing pool for 6 months before you fight someone. So they can test you throughout this, 6 months at least. There's a ton of other kind of background of that. Like you can go and train in Thailand, and it's harder for the agents to reach you. So people it's suspected a lot of people will train internationally, and you can log your location, but you can afford to miss logging your location a couple times before you really get banged for it. Point is, it's a very, very poor cover, and also they make exceptions for famous and profitable fighters all the time. They just waived it for Brock Lesnar before UFC 200. Literally one of the most roided out humans. Everyone knows it. Like, he's in WWE, comes into UFC, just, smothers Mark Hunt because he's 300 pounds and jacked, clearly on steroids. Even just recently, Conor McGregor's recovering from a leg break and has posted on Twitter about how, he wants to be out of the USADA testing pool because it's different when your leg's broken and only him, Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman can relate to that. Whatever. And again, UFC would bend over backwards for Conor and have, if you followed any of his antics at all, followed him throwing a dolly into the, into a bus with
they use that for
UFC
marketing footage.
Yeah.
And
there's so much stuff, dude.
He was arrested for something and they used it for marketing footage. He seriously injured Rose Namajunas and Ray Borg. Michael Chiesa too.
Yeah.
So he threw
I think.
Yes. He threw a dolly through a window. And to go back on the USADA thing, without going into too much weeds, because I don't know how much, but so I'm working on a video right now on USADA. I have a database of every single test by quarter right now.
Oh, let's go.
And Conor still has not been tested. And so what was
his last fight?
I don't know when he stopped. Yeah, it's probably the last fight. I don't know when the last. Yeah. I know that he currently still hasn't been. But what Alex is referring to is that you have to be tested so that you can show that you're not juicing, right? And he tweeted this thing saying essentially that there was a bylaw saying that under special use, trying to think of the word, sort of special exemptions for certain edge cases. So a famous one is Bigfoot Silva. He had an injury or a disease that was affecting his testosterone production. Yeah. So he was able to take testosterone replacement therapy, which is a steroid, as long as he was monitored to make sure that he was staying within a range that's like the average human male, right? And Alex Davis, great guy, great manager. He was the one that worked on getting that exemption for Silva. And so Conor's working to claim that he can use we haven't really talked about, we as in the community, haven't really talked about what it is he's taking, but take a look at photos of him and you can kind of tell there's something going on. He still hasn't been tested. He's currently on the Ultimate Fighter. And the way it usually works is that there's a fight scheduled at the end of the Ultimate Fighter. Contract has not been signed. He needs 6 months of testing before he can take a fight in the UFC legally, unless they give him as you talked about, the Lesnar exemption. The Lesnar situation is a pretty problematic one too for the UFC. Mark Hunt is actively suing the UFC because of the possibility. So the UFC he claims the UFC was aware that Brock Lesnar tested positive, but still allowed him to fight. And then after the fight, they changed it to a no contest. I don't know enough. I haven't followed the legal case, so I don't want to get sued for like defamation or something. But there's a lot of questions there about that. And, you know, famously, Mike Tyson has said that he believes anyone that uses steroids and goes into a combat sport should be charged with attempted murder because of the danger that is inherent to that. And so there's a lot of people talking about, Mike Tyson has reiterated that recently, and it's something that a lot of people are talking about. And the Conor situation is sort of playing out in real time, where we get to see how the UFC is going to react.
Dude, Conor's head and face looks different, bro. He's so fucking jacked.
I don't know what he weighs, but so I'm 5'8". I believe he's listed at 5'9". Yeah. And his build, so Joe Rogan is also 5'8". Joe Rogan takes testosterone, so he's, you know, too big. He's like, I think he says he's usually around 200, 205, and Conor doesn't look like he's more than like 10 pounds, 15 pounds lighter than Rogan when he's sort of like in good shape. Conor looks, again, allegedly, don't sue me or whatever, but like he definitely looks like he's on something, in my opinion. And a lot of fighters are saying that, but like I have to be careful now that I don't get sued. Yeah. So allegedly, in my opinion, Conor looks like he's on juice, and I don't think that he's going to fight Michael Chandler. So there's a hot take for you. I don't think that they're going to have that Michael Chandler fight. I don't think that Conor has not signed the dotted line, and I don't know that he's going to get that exemption. I believe that is what's holding up the signing, is the UFC giving him that exemption. I don't know anything about the politics behind the scenes, but there's if you wanted to like sound cool to your friends, tell them Conor McGregor's not going to fight Michael Chandler. And when you're proven right, you can thank Jason and Alex for that hot take.
You think he fights in 2023 at all? Or just doesn't get into the testing pool early enough to fight Chandler?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the former. I think that he will fight. I think he will fight in 2023 near the end of the year. I think Chandler's a great fight for him. I don't know if Chandler's going to be willing to wait. I don't know what's going to happen. But
I feel like Chandler would be willing to wait, dude. That dude would be willing to. He's got like Armon and Gamrot calling him out. Like he doesn't want to face.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to
grapplers. He'd just rather.
And Conor, the paycheck that Conor provides is not comparable to anything else. It's literally like Dustin Poirier gave up a title shot, a winnable title shot, for the ability to fight Conor twice. And Dustin doesn't really fight anymore that much. So it's, you know, the paycheck is momentous. Like if you actually want to be wealthy from MMA, you have to fight Conor McGregor, and that's it.
Yeah.
Or Jake Paul, apparently. But yeah, you know. So if I'm Michael Chandler, I'm waiting. I'll wait till the day that Conor McGregor's ready to go. Yeah. You know, I'm praying that he tests negative so that I can get that paycheck.
Yeah. Speaking of someone who's tested negative, as far as I know, but very likely also on something, Michael Chandler. Dude, I still feel like. I think.
I thought you were talking about Jones. I thought you were transitioning Jones. I'm juicy. But Chandler, yeah. Okay, what about Chandler?
Oh no! Well, I just want to mention that. Yeah, I mean, he like
that.
Also, if you don't get caught by USADA, there's also a good chance you're on something because they only test you max like 10 to 15 times a year. Like I said, plenty of ways to avoid it. You can just train someone internationally, and the agents can't reach you as easily. You can afford to not check in, and they're like, "Oh, we're at your house. Where are you?" Like, "Oh, my bad. I'm across the country, or I'm across the world." Okay, there's strike one. You got like two more.
So they've got better at that one, at that specific instance that you're talking. They've gotten better at that, but so I'm working on doing some modeling right now. I don't really have much results, but I'm trying to see if I can find when people do what you're talking about, because there's a famous case of Jiri Prochazka, who used to be the light heavyweight champion. He was tested 64 times.
I'll pop it on the second one, by the way, bro.
All right, no problem.
I'm so sober up to an afternoon because I still got some work to do, but I'm coding, so I'll hit that bomber peak.
So he was tested 64 times in 2022. And for reference, the first person to reach 50 tests was Kamaru Usman, I believe, in 2020 or 2021. Wow. So in 1 year, so USADA's been around since 2015 or 2016. It's July of one of those 2 years, I can't remember. So in about 5 or 6 years, it took to get Kamaru Usman, who, if you look at his body, there's constant questions about. I think that steroids are overrated in terms of the utility, how many people are actually using them. The way that you should look for steroids generally is actually injuries So like TJ Dillashaw was taking EPO because he couldn't train because of the shoulder injury. And so there's some questions around Jones.
Was that for that? I thought he has it for EPO against Cejudo. I thought
his shoulder was gone before that. His shoulder was gone all the way back to Garbrandt 2. In the training for Garbrandt 2, he tore his first shoulder.
I didn't know that.
Didn't have surgery until he lost to Cejudo and got pumped. So that's how long. So for people listening, that is 2 or 3 fights where his shoulder. I think it was 2. So it's Garbrandt 2 something Cejudo. Yeah, because he went down.
Sense.
Yeah. And so then
Garbrandt,
2 to 3 fights.
Garbrandt was a first round finish, right? And then Cejudo, obviously, he got smoked by Cejudo in like 30 seconds when they were able to tell.
I think it was the second round. It was
Garbrandt 2?
I always watched Garbrandt 1 and Garbrandt 2 back to back, and so they're just one fight to me. So I actually have no idea when it was. But let's go with round 1. But so I personally don't think Chandler. I just think that he's 5'5" and weighs 155 pounds, so he's just massive. So when you get shorter and you have to weigh that much, you just get jacked. But who are we talking about? The other one before that?
You thought I was going to talk about
just you,
Jones.
Yeah, and Jiri and Jiri Prochazka. That's another one that there's a really interesting situation around him where he was. They give you a jacket, like a master's jacket when you hit 50 because it's such a momentous achievement. In 1 year, he was tested more than this momentous occasion. So I mean, like if USADA was a competition, it'd be like winning the Triple Crown, I guess. Of what Jiri just did, and not enough people talk about that. And conspiracy Jason, if I put my hat on, he has 64 tests, and then right before the biggest fight of his career, the rematch with Glover Teixeira, he comes into the PI, and they're like, "This is the worst shoulder tear we've ever seen." So do with that information what you may. That in the lead up to that fight, he was tested, I think it was 45 times in 2 quarters. So it's supposed to be December 2022 from quarter Q3, Q4, or Q2, Q3, or Q3. From Q2 to Q4, he was tested more than Kamaru Usman in a 4 or 5 year span. So, and that ended with him showing up with a massively torn shoulder, as told by Dana White. So, do with that information as you may.
We should move on to Jones because we just
I talked too long about these things. So let's get into juicy Jones.
It's good. I just know you have that cutoff you mentioned. Yeah, I was going to say just leading into to Jones. First off, just for anyone that's a very casual fan, return of Jon Jones. He's been out of action for around 3 years. Moving up from light heavyweight to heavyweight. Also, for people not really to know, Jones is arguably the GOAT. I mean, everyone's got their own list. Almost anyone I imagine will put him in top 5. Only reason you don't put him in top 5 is just because there's a lot of question marks. He's failed multiple tests. The rebuttal to that is a lot of people are on stuff, and we're definitely on stuff when he kind of first came up. He has some crazy achievements. He's still the only person in contention for GOAT, depending on how high you are on Khabib. Like I think Khabib just doesn't have a deep enough resume to be considered. But newer fans might be like, "Oh, Khabib never lost," whatever. Jones also hasn't really lost. He only has a DQ on his record in a fight he absolutely dominated, and was just using illegal downward elbows, and got DQ'd. But again, for all intents and purposes, he's undefeated. Yeah, although the last couple fights have been much more. He's kind of skated by. People think he lost his last fight. He got a unanimous decision. But Jones, super talented guy, insane head case out of the cage, just which we don't have to talk about because it's just you can just read.
I could go on for too long on that part. Yeah, if you want, I'll stick to the athletic parts for you, so I don't go too far.
Yeah. I mean, so we don't get sued.
Well, no, I mean it's all public record.
Yeah,
There's nothing. Yeah.
So I was going to say just to intro it in. Jones actually used to be. I don't know if I told you. I think we talked about it when we got drinks in Chicago about when we started watching MMA. I started watching right before UFC 100. And low-key, I don't know if I told you this, low-key, one of my favorite fighters initially was Jones, just because I probably looked up some SureDog list of top prospects, saw his fight at UFC 100, saw he'd already kind of put on display against Stephan Bonner, Andre Guzmão, and then just kept track of him, and he obviously youngest UFC champion at the time, won the UFC light heavyweight title at 21, just smoked through Shogun Rua, Rampage Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, all legends, like in like 12 or 14 months.
Yep.
Like, and again, this is definitely, this is public record, but like Jones has like been on record talking about how he used to do like coke in between fights, like partying, all this stuff. Like, dude, if you watch him when he was like 21 or 22 compared to now, he looks like he just did a line before fighting, bro. He was so reckless. Opening at 21, opening the world championship fight against Shogun Rowe with a flying knee in the first couple of seconds. Insane confidence. But last couple of years he's been really inactive. Some of the stuff like is like out of the cage issues. Also, he just like, in my opinion, just looks physically like a bit of a shell of himself. He's not too old now. I think he's probably I'd probably guess 33 or 34 without looking
34.
it up.
I think
34?
When I was watching the embedded, I think he's 34 or 35. He's got gray hair.
Hasn't fought in 3 years. Carrying more weight, went up to heavyweight, and again has looked nowhere near as explosive. Last couple fights, just getting bonded on the decisions, in my opinion. And he's fighting Cyril Gane, who's only lost to the. It's another. We could talk about Gane for a whole full episode.
I can't. I'll go too long.
Yeah. But Cyril Gane, pretty talented dude from kickboxing.
Yep.
Really fast for a big guy. Doesn't have crazy KO power or anything, but like really fast. Seems like he has really high fight IQ. Doesn't necessarily have a great grappling base. He kind of lost his title shot against Gane, who's not a grappler himself. But a really interesting fight, given that there's question marks on both sides. Anyways, now that I give that lead in, give me some initial thoughts on Jones.
Sure. So I'm doing a full breakdown over on our Patreon, and one of the things that I want to do is I want to watch through his entire career multiple times, because if anyone follows me on Twitter, they know that I talk a lot about his out of the cage things. I like, because nothing is funnier to me than more the casual Jones fans DMing me like, "Don't talk about the GOAT that way."
Really?
Yes, they get very aggressive. Yeah. Anytime that there's someone that's very popular with like an average fan, if you start to critique, they will get very angry. I get
MMA fans are nuts. Conor fans, Khabib fans, it's just like either whatever side of it, people are insane.
I think the meanest people have been to me are when I critiqued Islam Makhachev. So but second place close is Jon Jones. Actually, it's very interesting to read their comments. I love it. So if you guys are listening, like, please send them to me. It doesn't bother me at all. It's really funny to me because I don't think that a lot of people understand what Jones is and what he isn't. And so in my opinion, he is not the greatest of all time. I think that he is. If you guys like NBA, he's the equivalent of like Giannis Antetokounmpo, where it's like physically he is one of the greatest like physical specimens in the sport's history. I would say arguably he is the greatest physical specimen in the history of the sport by a pretty decent
84-inch reach.
84.5-inch reach at a 6'4" man. If you take his reach and his height as a ratio, no one has a larger ratio of height to reach in the history of the sport. His reach is 11% longer than his height. And so to understand why that matters in like a context is the reason that people think that Jon is the greatest is because one of the key things about being a light heavyweight is you have this binary where there are the Jones types, the 6'4" athletes, and then there's also, just to be blunt, like the 6 foot tall fat guys or the 6 foot tall ripped guys. And consistently, the biggest fighter that Jon ever faced was Gustafsson, and arguably gave him the toughest fight, probably the first fight that some people thought that Jones had lost in like a realistic manner. And so a lot of people think that I hate Jon Jones. I actually personally really do not think that the 12-6 elbow disqualification, I think that was a horrible call. That elbow that he uses is very consistently used in MMA. It was the violence with which he threw it that caused the disqualification. And so then you have to kind of have this conversation. I think
Mazzagatti was reffing it too, right?
So it's Mazzagatti too.
The most insane ref in the business. Literally banned from the UFC.
Mazzagatti and Yamasaki, I put a level higher. He's tier 1 of the worst, and I think the top of tier 2 is if your fans don't know, that's what. So like they'll say like, and reffing Mario Yamasaki, and he'll go like this. And
I love violence.
And he's really bad. He's probably the worst that I've ever seen. Mazzagatti is pretty bad. He's like Yeah, tier 2, like just below Yamasaki.
Yeah.
But and the other thing is that if people watch the Guzmão fight, that's the thing I always ask people is go watch the Guzmão fight. He was not very good against Guzmão. And I know people are going to yell at me in the comments for that. Go watch the Guzmão fight and then go watch the Gustafsson fight. Go watch the Hua fight. It's not the same fighter. He was young. And so that's how I know if people actually understand Jones is if they can go to the Guzmão fight and actually understand how to be critical of him. So to understand what Jones...
To be fair, he was 19, though. That was literally...
No, he was 20. So he won the championship. He like, it was like this. He's just like, okay, put me back in. And that's why he won so early. So he is the youngest champion in UFC history. Check the date because I'd actually like to know how old he was. But he is the youngest champion in UFC history, and he remains that. Erin Blanchfield is competing for it. She just beat Andrade. But while he's looking it up, I'll give you guys just a rundown of what makes Jones so talented. So the thing about Jones is that he's very good at fighting on the outside, which means that he's able to keep distance from his opponent and only get hit essentially when he wants to. His opponent, Cyril Gane, is also... You're right. He had just turned 21 in the Guzmão fight. He had just turned 21. Yeah. So to your listeners as well, a thing about MMA that's different than other sports is that actually as you get older, you're better because MMA is such a complex sport that it hasn't gotten to the point where athleticism is the key to winning. There are a lot of fighters that are in their early 30s that finally hit their stride and now they're peaking. They're not peaking athletically, but technically. And because of the way MMA works, that works. There are plenty of fighters.
Especially in higher weight classes. In higher weight classes too. Yes. Less talented physically. Yeah. Other sports pay way more money for a physical freak at 250. So there's way less like athleticism in heavyweight especially. So if you're smart and you keep your power, you can definitely beat. I mean, Glover Teixeira, great
42
example.
Years old.
Light heavyweight champ until a year ago. But anyways.
But the thing about Jones is his ability to keep that distance. So what Jones has done is he's a very smart fighter. He knows how to fight with his physical attributes. So a lot of what he does is use what's called an elliptical kick. It's basically just a front kick, a kick where I'm sort of like a push. I'm trying to kick you in the front of the knee to hyperextend it backwards. It's barbaric, but it's a very effective strike. So what he'll do is he'll use, when you try to move towards him, he'll either leg kick you, where he's smacking you in the calf or the thigh, or he's going to push on your knee to say, like, don't come any closer. And then what he'll do is he has two gears. If you can't bridge that distance, he's just going to fight you like that. He's going to kick you in the knee, kick you in the leg, kick you in the knee, kick you in the leg. And then when you start trying to defend, he's going to throw body kicks, he can throw head kicks. And he's not going to take any damage. And you're going to lose a decision because he's just going to fight you on the outside.
He also frames really well.
His long guard, So one thing I'll use on camera.
Poking out too.
One of the problems with long guards is that you get taught in kickboxing because you have a thing that you can go like this, but in MMA you can't because you have the finger gloves. So what he'll do is he uses what's called a long guard, where you use this and you're blocking people's ability to punch you because you can like grab. Right? My cat is in the background. But that aspect of him, he's like a worse version of Israel Adesanya. He's not exceptional actually as a distance
on the feet. Yeah,
on the feet. The true greatness of Jon Jones comes from when, especially earlier in his career, when people were able to bridge the distance. Jon Jones is a Greco-Roman wrestler. For those that don't really know what that means, there are I'm gonna get yelled at for this. There are three very like Central American disciplines of wrestling. I was a freestyle wrestler in middle school. There's freestyle, folk style, and Greco-Roman. There are many others. Don't yell at me. Combat Sambo. I know you guys are out there. Habib, all of them. They yell at me so much. But you forgot Sambo. And it gets me so bad. But Greco-Roman is mainly focused on upper body. So if any of you have ever wrestled or watched wrestling, single leg, double leg, high crotch takedowns, that is free and folk style. And then the difference between free and folk style is in the scoring criteria. Freestyle is about holding someone down. You get points for time. Folk style is about number of takedowns, so the number of successful takedowns. So there's two different ways that people will wrestle. Freestyle, which is one takedown and I control you for most of the round, or folk style, where I'm taking you down repeatedly. But then on the other side of the spectrum is Greco-Roman. And the rule set is very different in that you're not allowed to, I can't remember the exact specifics, so the Greco-Romans will yell at me because these people get so sensitive when you mess up their rule sets. But But you're not able to do those single leg, double leg. So most of it is clinch, where I'm like upper body. Like if imagine I'm going underneath Alex's like armpits right now, and I'm holding him on the shoulders like this, and we're just like, we're trying. And so then what I'm trying to do is throw you. Jones comes from Greco-Roman, and so what you'll see, especially early in his career, is that guys like you had brought up Rampage Jackson. Rampage did not know about the elliptical kick. He got kicked a couple times, hyperextended his knee, and he's like, I'm going to blow my knee if I don't get inside. So then he just starts rushing him. And Jones, 6'4", with an 84.5-inch reach, what he'll do is he'll grab onto Rampage's head and pull him under his thing into what is called a front headlock. And then he has a multitude of things. He can throw him over his hip. He can trip him. He can do what's called a guillotine, which is a choke, which you see Lyoto Machida. If you watch that fight, he uses the guillotine choke to finish him. Against Shogun Rua, he uses the throws to get into ground and pound. And with Rampage, he uses the throws to get to his back for a rear naked choke. That is what differentiates Jon Jones. A lot of people talk about him as a striker. His striking is decent. He has terrible backboxing fundamentals.
Yeah.
He is a very natural.
Yeah,
he's a very natural kickboxer, but really his gift is that he is one of the most efficient and effective clinch fighters in the UFC. And so I put this on our Patreon for paid, but I wanted to save this to talk to you about. So what I did is exclusive R&D pod exclusive. So
hold on, bro. I think I can share this. The distance clinch, right? Split.
Oh yeah. Did I send you the numbers on it?
No. I was just gonna share a tweet. Real quick.
Oh, okay. Are you gonna put it into the video, or do you want me to verbally say it?
Yeah. Well, you can say it too. I'm just about to screen share it. You should see it.
I'll wait till it comes. Perfect. All right. So this is the tweet that I sent out, and I made it and you can see who's that first comment. So what I wanted to do was I don't see a lot of people talking about it as this binary of when Jones is using striking versus when Jones is able to actually get that front headlock clinch. This is going really deep. I realize now that it's going to be a little tough for like more casual fans. So think of it like this. These are the statistics. The way I've split it out is when, as Alex had talked about, Jon has been falling into these very close decisions recently. And this is something that happens to distance strikers in MMA, that over time they get a really good sense of when they're winning rounds and when they're losing rounds. And so they do just enough to win rounds. MMA has a problem with bad judging. And so you get some instances where, personally, I think that he won 48-47 versus Thiago Santos, but that was a split decision. One of the judges believed that Thiago Santos had beaten Jon. And then the most recent fight, I thought it was 48-47 Dominic Reyes, where Dominic had won 3 out of the 2 rounds, 3 out of the 5. So what I did is I split out Jones's entire career between when he finishes fights and when he goes to decision. So the top row there is when he goes to decision. So he spends 71.6% of his time standing striking when he goes to decision. The key thing to notice is that when he finishes people, he only spends about 60%, with 30.1% of his overall time spent in ground control. Now, you'll notice that this doesn't add up to 100%, and that is also because this is only there's a difference between clinch control and clinch controlled, where someone else is in control in the clinch. So that's why you're going to see those number disparities. But what you'll notice is if you add it up roughly, you're looking at 95% of the time in fights where he is winning by finish, he is in control or striking, right? 30.1 plus 4.5 plus 59.8, right? In fights where he's going to decision, he is at 83.3, 89. So we're looking at about 90%. So you're seeing about 5% more of the time he's being controlled in the clinch, because he rarely gets taken down. I think he has one takedown. It was Gustafsson took him down. But what you're seeing is that when he goes to decision, he is not, it's that distance I was talking about. It's when he's fighting too much on the outside in distance. So really, if you want to ask a question, if you want to, gamble on this or whatever, the way to think of this, baby. You're going to lose me all my money. But the thing is that the real key to this fight is Jones going to grapple? And one thing that you as fans may not know is that he's really gone away from his grappling as he's gotten older, because as you get older, your chin, your ability to take shots goes away. And to fight on the inside, there's much higher chance of you getting hit and getting knocked out. So he's fighting much more cautiously. I personally think that Some people say PEDs. I don't personally think so. I think that his athleticism has gone down. Something that you'll notice if you watch the Embeddeds is he's using swimming for his cardio.
Yeah.
And that's generally happens when you have a lot of knee damage from running. And so you have to use other forms. I personally think more fighters should use swimming. That's a little not important. But I think there are some real questions about his overall health. He's been wrestling since he was young. He has been fighting for 15 years in the UFC, 15 years in the UFC now. And so there's some real questions about the longevity. And I think part of that 3-year layoff was to repair a lot of the damage that happens to your body. One thing that, to bring it back to TJ Dillashaw, TJ talked about how when you win the title, it's very hard because if you need surgery, they can strip you, they can create an interim title. You don't have as much control on your career.
Yeah.
Now, Jones has been champion since he was 21 years old, and he's currently 34 or 35. He has been champion for a majority of that time, aside from the last 3 years when they stripped him for inactivity, and then his various arrests. Yeah. But it's something to consider that there's a lot of wear and tear on his body, and I think that's part of the reason. And one of the things
I assumed it was knee shot, knees are just shot. Like,
but there's
he also just
something else you had said, which is his drug habits. So to be very specific about what Alex was talking about, Jones has said repeatedly he was a very consistent recreational cocaine user, and what he would do is he described it to Rogan. Jon Jones is like the king of rewriting his history to make it sound more noble.
Lying, yeah.
I like that. And the way he described it was that there was sort of this like lack of self-confidence where he felt like if he could get really drunk a week before a fight, if he lost, he would have a reason that he could give himself. Oh, I shouldn't have partied. So what would happen, if you guys go watch his career, is watch every time he fought someone twice. The first time he fought them, it was always a little close. And the second time he decimated them. Absolutely decimated them. Gustafsson and DC are the two main ones. And a lot of times what happens is actually the reverse, where you'll see people really good in the first fight and steadily it gets chipped away because people figure them out. I personally think that Jon Jones does have some of those mental hurdles. And one of the things that happens in those second fights is he takes it to his opponent rather than fighting on the outside. A lot more clinch. I'm running the numbers right now to actually make that specific case. I didn't have them ready. I can send them to you, Alex, if you want to see them. And anyone that's interested, follow me on Twitter. I'll send them to you too. But
first, talk shit. Say, why the fuck you hating on my boy Jon Jones?
Yes. Also, send me your hate about my. He's not the GOAT. Mighty Mouse Johnson's the GOAT. Second place is GSP. I do think he's top 5. Habib is not in there. Islam Makhachev lost. No, he won, but he's not pound for pound number 1. Here's all my hot takes, so I can get yelled at. But I personally think that just to get, because I'm running out of time here, I want to make sure I get in the actual important part that everyone's listening for. I do think Jon Jones is going to win this fight. I have a relationship with Cyril Gane's coach. I've been watching Cyril Gane for 2 years now. A huge fan. Part of my initial success as an analyst was me talking about Cyril Gane, the first fighter I ever talked to. Yeah. Cyril Gane, first coach I ever talked to. Fernand Lopez, Cyril Gane's coach. I think that Cyril Gane's a really tough matchup for Jon. I think that Cyril is much bigger than Jon physically, and I think he will come in stronger. But
Jon looks like shit. The picture I saw him, he's looked way tubbier than I thought. He's had 3 years to pack on like 20 to 30 pounds.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what happened, in my opinion, is that Jon wasn't gaining enough muscle mass fast enough, and he didn't want to come in as like a 235-pound heavyweight, so he just started bulking. And so he weighs, I think, 255. We haven't had the weigh-ins yet, but a lot of people are saying he's going to weigh in around 255. I think it was more of an ego thing, like I'll bulk, make sure I get as much muscle. Because Cyril Gane, if any of you don't know what he looks like, he is a big guy. Not Francis Ngannou 280, but he's lean. And Jon is not lean. But Cyril Gane's grappling is genuinely some of the worst I've seen. Francis Ngannou, I don't know if people realize how badly Francis Ngannou beat him, out-grappling him. I don't know if people have really taken a look at the tape to really understand. It was very bad. I did a video talking about it. And I just don't think that in the about 14 months now, since that fight, I don't think there's enough for him to take on a skilled grappler of the caliber of Jon. Really, the only thing that's going to be able to help Cyril is his size, the difference of muscle mass. But I just don't think that Jon's the difference in size doesn't overcome Jon's skill in the grappling. And so I think this fight goes one of two ways. If Jon is indeed shot physically, he will fight on the outside, and I think Cyril Gane will win a 48-47, very close, controversial decision. But if Jon is in better shape because of the 3-year layoff, I think he's going to fight on the inside more with Cyril, and he's going to use cage control to corner Cyril, get the clinch. And I don't think that Cyril can survive in bottom guard on the ground on his back with Jon. Jon has some of the best ground and pound I've ever seen. And if Cyril breaks his posture, meaning that he bends over like this in the clinch, I think he's going to get guillotine choked unconscious. Because Jon is elite at using double overhooks, which is a version of the clinch system I was talking about, to get a front headlock where the head is right here. And then what he'll do, go watch so my dad watched this fight and almost never watched MMA again with me, so watch at your own peril. But so it's not Shogun, it was the other Brazilian fighter whose name I'm forgetting.
Vitor?
No, the earlier, it was the Last Dragon. What's his actual name?
That Jon's fought?
Yeah, so he fought Shogun, then he fought Rampage, and then he fought Lyoto Machida. So he does a standing guillotine on Lyoto Machida and then drops his unconscious body, and it's horrible to watch. Standing guillotine. So I don't think...
Go get some fans, Jon!
But I do think that Jon wins probably by a technical knockout if he fights the way that he should. And if he does fight the way that he should, I think he will have... I think he's only got about 2 to 3 more fights left in his career, but I think that he will... continue to win. I don't think there's anyone at heavyweight besides Francis Ngannou that really can give Jon a run for his money. I don't think Stipe's there. Maybe Curtis Blades, but they don't want to give him a title shot. So
Tom Aspinall, if he can come back from his injury fast enough.
I don't think that. I think Tom is 2 fights away from getting a title shot, and I don't think Jon's going to be around when Tom is competing. Tom is the next man up at heavyweight, in my opinion, to win the title.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have such low faith in grappling Jon. I just haven't seen it in so long. I would probably lean, if I had to pick, I'd probably lean towards a very close decision by Cyril. I haven't seen Cyril like put away too many people with 1 or 2 shots, and the couple things that Jon has still shown as his grappling has declined is he's still tough as hell.
Yes,
and I've never really seen him wobbled. I think the most I've seen him wobbled was a Lyoto punch in the first round.
Yeah, that Lyoto right hand was great.
Yeah. But he tanks shots, and Cyril doesn't have KO power, so I have a hard time seeing Cyril finish him. And Jon, I mean, we'll see how it goes with the extra weight, but Jon still always had like good cardio. He edged out in a fight I also think he lost against Reyes. He edged out round 4 and 5.
Yep.
And just had constant pressure, even though he's getting like lit up pretty hard in the first couple rounds.
Yep.
I mean, again, Jon's a scumbag. I used to be a pretty big fan of his when he was like 21, 22. He's a scumbag and makes it a little bit hard to root for him, but also that's just MMA. Like,
yes.
So
it's hard to root for the good guys. There's that many.
Yeah, dude.
There are some.
Even Dana, bro. Not that I was ever like Dana's biggest fan, but I was privy to the like, you know, it's like, yeah, I knew Dana was a lying scumbag before this year, but it's like, it is kind of chill that he is relatable, really loose, and brings a new perspective to being commissioner of a sport. And then it's like, oh yeah, he's obsessed with power slap, and then slapped his wife on video, just like completely, honestly, tanked my appetite for MMA for at least a couple weeks, just because like, dude, it's just everything runs through Dana, and he's just
it was a hard thing to be a fan during that time, you know, especially with the lack of punishment. The famous line from him is that being known as a abuser is punishment enough, and no, it's just not. He also
said the whole time, or like throughout the decades of just MMA fighters doing insane shit, like out of the cage, which also, again, this could be another podcast episode, but it's like there's a lot to unpack there because people are literally getting CTE in front of you, and then going and doing insane fucking shit. And it's like very hard to not kind of connect the dots. Like, yeah, this person is literally missing like functioning parts of that, you know, whatever. But anyways, I know you got to go really quick. Do you want to just rifle through some predictions on the rest of the card?
Go for it. Yeah.
Grasso Shevchenko.
Shevchenko decision.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, I like Alexa too, as I told you, bro.
I love Alexa. I wanted to win. I'll pull up the card. Do you have it in front of you?
No, I was just gonna go off memory, but I pulled out Shavkat Gioff.
Shavkat wins. I don't know. I don't really have a mind of how, but I do think that Shavkat wins. Keep knocking over the beer. Shavkat wins. I think Matuz Gamrot beats Jalen Turner. I think Bo Nickel is probably going to destroy Jamie Pickett. Nickel, if you also
hopefully, bro, he's a minus 1600 favorite.
16?
Minus 1600 is what I saw.
Bet on Jamie Pickett because that is an insane line. But Bo Nickel is like the next.
Garbrandt is fighting.
Yeah, Garbrandt fights in the prelim.
Anything about that, dude?
So I do think Cody's going to win this one. I think Derek Brunson beats Dricus Duplessis. Viviani.
Yeah.
I love Amanda. So I know both of them. They are wonderful people. That's like one of the best like person versus person when you got Jon Jones and Dana White. Viviani Araujo is a great advocate for domestic violence victims and does a lot of great work in Brazil. Amanda Hebas has like one of the best personalities in MMA. She's a wonderful person. I've talked to her. She's just great. Julian Marquez versus
Isn't Joe Marquez the dude who like told Miley Cyrus to get a tattoo
if you guys
his name on her
don't
belly?
know that story, you should see it. It's like one of the most famous MMA memes. So in a post-fight press, like a little post-fight interview, he came out to Miley Cyrus. I can't remember. It might be Wrecking Ball. He came out to, and he said it was like Valentine's Day, and he's like, Miley Cyrus would be my Valentine. So she responds to him and says, if you shave Miley Cyrus into your chest, then I will, like go on a date with you. And he says, if you get a henna tattoo of his nickname, the Cuban Missile Crisis, then I'll do it. And
what a joke, bro.
She posted on her Snapchat story just a picture of her and said, you missed out. And without fail, when he's fighting, if you go on Twitter, all the people will be posting that because incredible missed opportunity for just incredible branding. Not even the date, just like branding yourself as like, that dude's the guy that went on a date with Miley Cyrus. Now he's the guy that fumbled the date with Miley Cyrus. He seems like a good dude, though. He's funny. But and then early prelims, Ian Gary. I think he's going to win.
What are your thoughts on Ian Gary?
He's not championship material, but I do think he's a top 10 fighter at welterweight. Mana Martinez, Jessica Penne, Tabitha Ricci. So I don't know. As we're getting further, it's getting into like I haven't watched enough fights. Fareed Basharat. Him and his brother Javed are fantastic fighters out of Afghanistan, I believe. They train. I don't remember where they train now. It might be at Extreme Couture in Vegas. But those two guys, up and coming, great stars, great people. They're very nice. I've talked to them as well. Ground and pound system out of who is Fareed's ground and pound system? Sick. Jessica Penne, Tabitha Ricci. I take Tabitha in that one. Don't know the Esteban Ribovic. I don't know either, or Mana Martinez or any of them. But overall, this is like the best card they've had in months since that card with TJ.
Yeah. The only thing is, there's big names. There's just like too many mismatches. I think, like Valentina, Shavkat, and I don't know about Shavkat and Nickel are huge favorites. Gamrot should be a big favorite. I don't know what he actually is. Jalen Turner's
short
good.
notice.
Jalen Turner's good. Yeah.
He took this fight on 2 weeks' notice, so that's the problem. That Jalen Turner is like 6'2" at 155. Matuz Gamrot is 5'8", so that's like a lot of what's happening. Is that he's called the Tarantula. Jalen Turner, great fighter, got knocked out by Vicente Luque.
5-5 win streak. Okay, and all finishes.
He finished. I'm trying to remember.
Brad Riddell.
Brad Riddell. main training partner of Alexander Volkanovski. Alexa Grasso, great fight. Highly recommend for everyone that's watching. It's going to be a really great weekend. Hope you all enjoy. Check out MMAI on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. And the Patreon.
Yeah, sure.
We're dropping more juice on all the business stuff.
Yep.
But wait, so you said you work with work with Grasso or just send cat memes?
No. That was you're thinking of. Give me a second. I'll tell you who you're thinking of. That's a different fighter. That's a different fighter from Mexico. Aldana. Irene Aldana. Yeah. So to those that don't know what he's talking about, I love cats. I have a cat named Sky. He just turned 15. Feliz cumpleaños, my guapo. Quinceañero. And Irene Aldana has a ton of cats, and I send the cat pictures to Alex on Instagram or Twitter. Where do I send them to you?
Twitter.
Okay. Yeah. So whenever she fights, she'll always post pictures of her cats. And so I send them to Alex because Alex loves every nail down.
I mean, bro, I like Alexa Grasso too, dude. I was about to look up are either of them single, dude? Because I'm down to get I'm easily down to get anything shaved on my chest here, bro. I don't go. Yeah.
All right.
All right. I know you got to go. I'm gonna put this up later today, by the way.
Okay, sounds good. I'll tweet out and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
All
sweet.
right, man.
Yeah.
Great talking.
We'll talk soon. Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Have a good one.